What the paragraph replaces. Reading Robert Walker's What the Ashes Hold. Alongside The Great Gatsby. On the left, a shadow. On the right, a woman looking upward. This is the distance between what Fitzgerald wrote and what Walker restores. One side holds a plot device. The other holds interiority, agency, and tragic depth. This is a visual analysis of how a companion novella reclaims a character who spent a century as a ghost in someone else's masterpiece. In 1925, F. Scott Fitzgerald created one of the most consequential novels in American literature. He also created a ghost. Myrtle Wilson is introduced in Chapter 2 with overwhelming vitality, but no backstory. She is defined only by her presence, never by her past. Nick Carraway, our trusted narrator, catalogs her body, her voice, and her grammatical errors with undeniable condescension. He grants her volume, but never history. And so for a century, Myrtle has existed merely as a function, a casualty engineered to demonstrate the vast carelessness of the rich, a plot device, not a person. Consider the erasure. In Chapter 7 of The Great Gatsby, Myrtle's entire existence is collapsed into body parts on a work table, a breast swinging loose, a mouth ripped open at the corners. That is how American literature chose to remember her, in the language of wreckage. Now consider the reclamation. Walker writes, every function was once a person. Every body on a work table had a life before the narrative took it away. His novella acts as a forensic reconstruction. It proves that the woman who ran toward the yellow car wasn't running recklessly. She had been running toward something her entire life. At 22, working the back counter at Hopper's Drugs, the Myrtle read magazines, but not for pleasure. She read them as navigation charts. Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair, Town Tattle. She studied the silhouette, the sleeve length, the exact vocabulary, words like taupe. She practiced the posture, the stride, and the language of the women on those covers, mapping the postal codes of the wealthy, mapping a world she fully intended to occupy. George Wilson won Myrtle in a suit that fit perfectly. Dark wool, correct lapels, tailored shoulders. It looked like evidence that he was heading to the destination she had mapped. That was the courtship. Here was the reality. 3 days after the wedding, a stranger knocked on the door to collect the suit. George had borrowed it. In that moment, Myrtle realized she had married the evidence of a destination her husband did not actually possess. The suit was a costume. The man was permanent. Now look at where she lived. The Valley of Ashes, sweet chemical particulate from the rendering works that permanently altered the color of ambition. The ground trembling every 45 minutes to the iron schedule of an elevated train that ignored the valley entirely. Ash that settled overnight was wiped away and returned by noon. Wiping was not cleaning. It was a ritual of endurance, and for 11 years George called their situation temporary. Myrtle learned that temporary is simply the word people use when the permanent truth is too hard to say aloud. The daily train ride was the threshold, the physical and psychological distance between the life she was trapped in and the life she was building. And then, the catalyst. Enter Tom Buchanan. Patent leather shoes, a tailored dress suit, white cuffs. The visual evidence was unmistakable. Myrtle pressed her leg against his. This was not an act of desperation. It was a calculated test of a hypothesis she had carried for 20 years, and the yes was a door opening. 2 fabrics, 2 identities. In the valley, Myrtle wore brown figured muslin. Its function was survival and invisibility. Shoulders drawn in, chin dropped, diminished carriage, designed to navigate 4 blocks of ash without attracting attention. At the apartment on 158th Street, she changed into cream-colored chiffon. Its function was performance and the taking up of space. Spine lengthened, chin raised. Imposing. Dangerous. Nick Carraway saw a tacky outfit change. What he missed entirely was that Myrtle was deploying a heavily rehearsed identity, one she had been constructing since she was 22 years old. The apartment was a stage set, maintained in the hours between Tom's arrivals and departures. Myrtle selected the oversized tapestried furniture because it was the most expensive option, $1,100, and the farthest aesthetic from the ash heaps. But buying the most expensive option to prove you belong is the ultimate marker of an outsider. And then there was the locked bureau, Tom's drawer containing the household money and his whiskey. A constant, quiet reminder that he funded the lease and she was merely an occupant. To survive the arrangement, the illusion required scaffolding. Catherine provided it. She spread the rumor that Daisy Buchanan was Catholic and did not believe in divorce, creating a fictional doctrinal obstacle. But this lie was Catherine's fiercest act of love. As long as a religious rule prevented Tom from leaving his wife, Myrtle was protected from the devastating reality. Tom could leave Daisy. He simply chose not to. A dog leash, leather and braided silver, $7 from a Madison Avenue boutique, an object meant to symbolize her new life accidentally migrated to her old one. Myrtle brought it back to the Valley of Ashes to polish it with her mother's silver cloth. It sat wrapped in white tissue paper in George's bureau drawer, a minor tarnish that required polishing. And in that collision, the object from one world sitting in the drawer of another, the irrefutable evidence that would destroy her. Myrtle was not running recklessly into the road. She was running toward a yellow car she explicitly believed held Tom Buchanan. Her escape, her funder, her rescue from a locked room. The tragic symmetry is devastating. The car did not belong to Tom, and Tom was not driving. The car that kills the mistress is driven by Daisy Buchanan, the wife Myrtle had never seen, whose existence dictated the limits of Myrtle's entire life. In the aftermath, two kinds of carelessness. Tom Buchanan cries over dog biscuits in the empty apartment. He retreats into his vast wealth, leaving the mess for others to clean. His grief is real, but his carelessness is structural. George Wilson, stripped of his wife and his reality, mistakes a faded oculist's billboard for the eyes of God. He turns his profound lack of imagination into a fatal, misdirected vengeance. At the inquest, Catherine pushes her pottery bracelets up her arms to silence them. She looks the coroner in the eye and commits absolute perjury. She swears Myrtle never knew Gatsby. She swears Myrtle was perfectly happy with George. She swears Myrtle was in no mischief whatsoever. She legally erases the 158th Street apartment to protect Myrtle from public disgrace. It is a protective fiction, constructed to keep her sister's dream intact in death. Reading What the Ashes Hold fundamentally changes The Great Gatsby. Myrtle is no longer a plot device or a ghost. The ashes do not just hold a body on a work table. They hold 35 years of wanting, performing, and surviving that Nick Carraway was unequipped to hear. The ashes hold everything. The ashes hold her.